thank you. Yeah, first some deep thank yous. Thank you to Tim and to Cassie and the Hillyer team in 2020. Teddy and Allison, they were a huge support too. And I think I heard that he's here, but I'm not great with names. But whoever my mentor was, yes, hi, the last person I met with before the pandemic, yeah, met 4 years ago, ultimately to plan the show. And then, yeah, as Tim was saying, that didn't happen. And then, everybody knows the history of the past 3 years. So it's been a long time coming, and it's really wild to see like the work that I proposed in that first show. It ultimately had similar themes, but was much different. And I'm sure, like many artists, my work has changed quite a bit since then. So it's really exciting to see that timeline and just be presenting this new work to you. So yeah, just a deep thank you. Thank you to all of you for coming out. These two especially, shout out to Kristen and Devin. They're really, really amazing, good friends of mine. So, close friends, faraway friends, new friends' faces, thank you so much. And as well to, I received a mini grant from Integrity Arts and Cultural Association. So I just want to put that on the record. Thanks to them for supporting this work. I proposed this work before it was even made, and they, believed in the written concept of it. So that was super encouraging. And then, yes, I am always a bit nervous, so please do excuse my notes, but I have little notes. But and then lastly, he had to sneak out because she kind of freaked out at the last minute. But my husband is here, and he sacrificed much of his extra time for me to sneak away from familial stuff to get some solo time making this work, and he sacrificed a lot of his time too. So he gets tons of thank yous, but it's got to be on the record as well. But I wanted to start with a quick history that led up to the exhibition. We had our first daughter in 2017. We've had 3 since then. And when our first was born, I was a bit unsure of how you do both the motherhood thing and the arts thing, and how I would oil paint alongside my daughter, and would she eat my paints, and all these different kinds of questions. And so from 2017 to 2022, I worked solely in graphite and charcoal. And that work, what started again as just a quick materials change due to having our first child, actually turned into a huge study of that material. And I quickly realized that the material kind of expressed a paradox that mirrored motherhood immensely so. Like when I had Esther, I realized that these excruciatingly conflicting emotions exist right next to each other. It's extremely paradoxical, and it's tender and it's aggressive, and your body is tearing, and it's also so soft, and it's tender and it's holy, and it's all of these emotions all mixed together. And graphite kind of, but especially charcoal, does the same exact thing, because of the different ways that the different forms that the material can take. So you can draw with graphite powder, and it's like painting it on, and it's literally powder. I mean, it just poofs into the air, and it's velvety and it's soft, and you can take time slowly layering it. And then you also have your charcoal sticks, and if you hack at them with a knife, you can make them quite rigid, and you can scratch at the paper. And so that work in the past, it had those two elements. I tried to overlap, abstract expressionism with figurative realism to try and kind of express those two different feelings that kind of felt like they were colliding quite a bit. So it kind of took it consisted of figures that were shrouded in laundry, and piles of toys that were like exploding all over and kind of looked like they were like exploding out of a black hole. Like the work, or like holding, I have one of like me like holding a whole pile of eggs that speaks to like infertility and struggle, and then the mother. I have another one of like a mother holding herself in a similar way that Mary holds Christ in La Pietà, and a mother holding herself, and kind of this dying to oneself and sacrificing, like all of these really intense emotions. And the work itself kind of took on a very serious tone and a very humorous tone, the kind of way that you need to kind of laugh at yourself in order to release the tears a bit. Like you've got to laugh before you can just then kind of weep about everything. So that was all of that work for 5 years, was just black and white, and again, quite tender and aggressive at the same time. And then in the beginning of 2022, I had been talking with Tim about doing the show, and I kind of felt this urge to shift back into painting, and to introduce what you can see in this work, introduce an element of interior space and attempt to capture a slower caricature of time. And paint is just, again, such the perfect material to capture that type of emotion, because you can't attack the canvas in the same way. You can't attack the canvas with paint in the same way that you can attack paper with charcoal. Like, it's just, I mean, you could totally lash out at it, but the paint itself, I mean, it kind of just like onto the canvas, like it doesn't have the same kind of character about it. And so I kind of felt like it was no mystery that shift happened at the same time that we settled into our first house, and we had Edith, who maybe some of you saw. We had a new baby. It was our third child, and we're feeling the dog days of summer, and I started homeschooling. It just kind of felt like, the days were slow, and time kind of just like crept on in a different way. Like the house felt settled, and I, myself felt like a more seasoned mom, and a bit less frantic. It just kind of felt like a little bit of like a chicken and the egg. Like, did my work kind of follow being more settled, or did I like want to get into painting and therefore somehow calmed myself? I don't know. It feels maybe a bit more like the former, in the sense that like my life kind of settled down a bit, and then the work kind of like, from that, I felt like I had more time to think and not just react. Like for 5 years, it just kind of felt like, oh, I have all this stuff in my brain, I've got to do it now, and it just like threw a drawing up. Or like, my son one time, that toy car drawing, he literally had just cleaned the house. Quick rabbit trail story. Just cleaned the house, and he took all of his toy cars. I had put them all in one bin, which was my mistake. I put them all in one bin, and he literally just threw them all like onto the floor, and from the other room I heard them all crashing, and I was infuriated at him. And then I decided to take a picture of it and take all of that emotion and then delicately draw the toys that like drew me crazy and like drew me mad. And it was like taking such an intense emotion and like filtering it through this pinhole, avenue kind of thing, like was almost like a discipline of myself. And so in a sense, my work has always been quite therapeutic in that way. It's always been quite it's been a processing tool for me. So then, back to this, so in 2022, like the state of my heart felt much more settled, the state of my life. And I started getting really inspired. Actually, I brought the book. I started getting very inspired by the intimism artists. It's like a movement that kind of fits right in between the Impressionists and the Post-Impressionists, and it's just a couple of artists over in France that get very infatuated with this writer guy. Coqueville calls it the intimate interiors, And it's mostly Edward Viard, but Bonnard is in there too, and Mary Cassatt kind of slips in there slightly. So this work takes a ton of inspiration from them. And the one quote from this book that I wrote down that I love, that this writer says, is that Edward Viard's creative life was entirely lacking in flamboyance. At no point did he do anything to attract trivial gossip, nor did he indulge in the flashy parade of heroism with the obligatory series of scandalous challenges to convention. And I felt like this simplicity, a life of nothing great in the eyes of convention, felt deeply releasing to me of worldly expectations, and I could just allow my art to just be like a documentation of my world, like my intimate interior of everything that was going on in our realm, and just like in our hubbub of our house and our world together. And so those dog days of summers and hours spent practicing letters and pretending to play picnic and patterned rugs just all started to capture my patterned thoughts, and just kind of started to capture my my interest and my inspiration. And I wanted to document it in a simple sense. But of course, we are all only human, and as I started slowing down, I started to recognize this restlessness like inside of myself at the same time, and a tendency to resent the mundane. And it was this yet another paradox comes about. Like here I am like frantic for 5 years, and then I like feel settled and I want to slow down, and I actually slow down, and then I start resenting like going slow, and like it just becomes this paradoxical journey, I guess, that you're on. And so I like found myself, the classic lines that I write down are things like, I'm sitting on the floor with my child for the 5th time in one day, and playing house and pouring fake tea and eating fake biscuits and feeling like everything in my life is fake and nothing is real, and everything is pretend. And like I'm building towers with my son, and then the other one comes in and knocks it down, and then you build it again and then knocks it down again, and you build it again, and it's just like this repetition. And then it just starts like in my mind, it just starts to bring up like all of these metaphors of dissatisfaction in my heart and just total impatience. And so I started to ask myself, like, why can I not just sit here in a content, present manner and, just on repeat, build a block and let it get knocked down, and just kind of let that exist in the moment it needs to, and like focus on what it's doing for my son. Like, just those, those musings in your own brain of like, why can't I just be here kind of thing. And, without going down that long-winded story, essentially the answer is my restless will, essentially, and my stubborn resistance of being told what to do, even by my 5-year-old, or like, I one time wrote down the line of, it's my unreconciled heart expecting fulfillment from the wrong metaphorical laundry basket. And so it essentially took on, like the year took on this huge wrestling metaphor. Like my work has always been, like I kind of alluded to, like it's always been the wrestling mat. Like I often take all, everything I'm already sharing in this talk, like take all of those thoughts, and then I kind of like wrestle with it in the drawing. And so it's not necessarily that like the drawing is the point. It's more so that the drawing is, it is the avenue. It's like the I don't know, the funnel you're going down to ultimately get somewhere else. And it's the tool that gets you processing. everything that's going on, in your own head. And so oftentimes, I had a beautiful quote, but I forgot the book. But ultimately, I'm an Orthodox Christian, and so these musings often pertain also to the idea of the divine and the sacred, and kind of the paradox between the mundane and the commonplace, and how those commonplace things can contribute to our spiritual sustenance, and like our growth, and the growth of our heart, and the rooting of our feet, and just like the grounding of our being, the raising of our soul. All of those thoughts all kind of exist all in one. And so ultimately, as I just started to notice, like as I'm wrestling, I can't help but thinking, like, our world moves so fast, and while it's moving so fast, I have misplaced expectations, and while I have those misplaced expectations, I start as well jumping on a train that's too fast, and so I start moving through our days, sweeping over things, thinking it's just debris, when actually it's material, if that makes sense. And then as I start to sweep over the sustenance, that's what I had written down, the substance. If I sweep over the substance of my day, I mistake it as debris rather than material. And when I sweep over the material of my day, I discard the growth and the sanctification and the inspiration and even the prayers. And when I sweep over the rhythm of prayer and the different rhythms, of your own life that bring health, then I actually fill that space with debris, and it becomes actual debris, not material. And so all of that kind of roundabout thinking got me kind of questioning, like, what material am I looking over? What's in the in-between moment? Or what is the commonplace thing, the mundane thing that I am seeing as debris, but really it's material? And how can I then use that as material for painting, and material for processing, and material for growth, and all these huge chapters that I just, kind of threw up on you guys, like it. So then it all kind of becomes just like this big bag, that metaphorical laundry basket, like the big bag that I kind of end up carrying, and I then like come to the canvas and like work it all out. But ultimately, the main thinking kind of happens in those in-between moments, and I start seeing them. Like, it's like all of a sudden, like, sometimes it's obvious, the light hits in a certain way, like in this piece, cat, dog, bear, frog, of my son and my daughter, in this one. It's like the light's hitting in a certain way, and it's kind of like the mundane in-between moment gets highlighted in a very obvious way. So then it's like, oh, I definitely have to like take a picture of that, and I want to like that's a pretty important marker for me to like put a tab. But then like the three like framed sketchbook pages are preliminary drawings actually for this huge painting that's in my studio right now. This is a drawing of my daughter, holding up her drawing inside our studio. So this is actually a painting, and that's a painting on my studio wall, and this painting is that painting, and that's another drawing. And so it, that one is a little bit more kind of like, how do I take like 3 months worth of mundane summer picnics and like try and make a painting of it, and try and have it hold all of the stuff that I just expressed to you guys. Because ultimately, at the very core of all of it, I have just recently recognized is this one line in my brain, that reconciliation is gained through the sacrifice of novelty. I can't even take full credit for it. My best friend is the one that got the words for me. I was like processing everything out for her, and she just like wrote that and sent it to me, and I was like, that's just completely it. It's the sacrifice of novelty for the sake of the commonplace moment that ends up totally somehow getting you to, you know, that upper mountain that I'm not even sure 100% what's there, you know, because I'm also still climbing the mountain. But it just feels like if I can continue to sacrifice the novelty of my misplaced expectations, then, you know, where could I go, or like where could my family go? So all of these pieces essentially are highlighting that sacrifice in a sense, and they're really nothing grandiose. They're nothing big, you know, like this is my daughter. I remember this day, the sun was hitting excruciatingly hard. I had just had my son. That year totally sucked. This was our one window in a tiny little 1,000-square-foot house we lived in, and she had completely trashed the couch, and I was sitting there being like, our couch is ruined, just like completely ruined. And you know, I gave a shout out to Trader Joe's because these cheese rocket crackers like saved us for so long of her not eating anything, and she's naked on the couch. I couldn't even get her dressed that day. Like, it's just like all of that's the moment behind this drawing, you know, or like this one is actually a collage of this is du personnage sur les robes. I'm blanking on the artist's names, excuse me for that, but a French artist just beautifully portrays these two figures like having a picnic, and you know all of those French paintings, and it's like, you know, these people just lounging, having their lunch, and I'm like, I want to lounge, I want to be inside there, and so I like snapped that picture of them lounging. I think they were in our basement, and I was like, I'm gonna build this. I'm gonna like try and like, you know, build this. And this was one of the first pieces of the show, and I don't even know if I fully got it, but it was just like, I'm gonna put the grass that I want and the picnic that I want and like my relaxing kids that I want, and then I'm maybe just gonna put it up on my wall and just kind of, I don't even know, just have it there maybe as like my goal. I don't fully know. But then what was funny is that following that was actually the real deal. I mean, our third child was born in the summer, and she, I mean, it was just like, let's go outside, kids, and just kind of lay around because mommy's tired and I got a third baby, and let's just kind of sacrifice any hopes of getting out of the house today, and you know, like random thoughts like that. And then I don't know, but then as you're making the paintings, it's edifying, and it's like, you know, I'm again in that moment being like, why do I hate this? And I'm like, you know, so unbelievably frustrated, and then I look back at what I made, and I'm like, I made a beautiful painting of my daughter in the grass. Why did I hate that? You know, and then like, you know, other, you know, I could go piece by piece to give the stories behind it, but instead, like this was the last one I did for the show, and I was working on that one. Yeah. We went in so I could work on this piece. I needed to add the patterning to the table, and I was proud of myself. I was like, oh, I got out of the house, yes! Like all three of my kids are coming to the studio with me. This is fantastic. I got no work done, like whatsoever. Like, it did not touch that painting. Instead, my daughter was so proud of her drawing. She was in my face about it. I have a deal with them to take pictures every single time that they draw something, just to help them feel proud about it. And my daughter was like loving the sun, our other son's like behind me taking the picture, and then I saw it and it was like, oh, this is like just such a layered image, and it to me, it just, because it's all my brain, it all connects. So then the layers of this drawing ended up reminding me of all of the layers. You know, I'm like, oh my goodness, like this metaphor, that, you know, spiritual aspect, and then this, you know, okay, this thing is just like all these layers of thoughts that go towards making up, like, essentially, I guess, just my mind and my being and stuff. And so all of the layers of, when I mentioned in the talk, it just was like, well, that makes sense to me. It's just, and I don't know if anybody will get it without me, you know, giving an artist talk, but ultimately I think that it's attractive to have all of these layers that you can then, you know, insert all of your layers, and like what's behind, you know, that painting of your heart, or what's behind that like debris on the floor that's actually material, and what's behind all these different things in your own life. You know, what cluttered studio table do you have, the different positionings of the chairs? You know, it's like, I constantly feel that way. Like, it's like, how can I get my child picked up with my third foot? No, can't do it. Like, it constantly feels like that, you know? And so ultimately, I see those things and document them and try and then recreate them in a sense. Like, I didn't set the chairs up like that, but I didn't change them when I was drawing them. It's one of those kind of things, and I think that connects to the idea of asking yourself in those in-between moments, what am I looking over and dismissing versus what am I dismissing that in reality I shouldn't, and I shouldn't change the direction of that because actually it speaks very poignantly, and rather I should sit here and let it highlight something. You know, I should let the pattern highlight something, like, in my life. It's not literally about the pattern, but then at the same time, it is literally about the pattern because it's my patterned thoughts all going kind of all over the place.